Stanley Kubrick once said, "If it can be written or thought, it can be filmed." Mind you, lest I remind you, Stanley Kubrick was also a pain in the ass to work with. He was the kind of guy, one minute you would walk on broken glass to work for him, next minute you'd probably want to strangle him. Yet at the same time, he was a chameleon, a director of diverse and amazing qualities that one could never recreate in this day and age. He didn't just make film, he wrote film. But the real secret is this: how do you write for film? And is something that's written meant to be a film? Is it meant to be a book? A comic? Who knows what? Today, on this episode, we're going to dive deep into how writing plays into the world of filmmaking and the arts in general. So, stick around and stay tuned. Hey folks, how y'all doing? I'm Al Tessier, and welcome to another episode of Chatterbox. So, today we're going to dive deep into the world of writing, and I know a lot of you people who might be listening in being like, you're meaning like all that stuff that I press on my teenage son for his essays in high school, but he doesn't listen to me. Well, here's the reality. There's more to writing than just the bullshit that kids do in grade school. I'm going to be talking about writing in the essence of how much there is that goes to it. There's not just writing for school. There is writing for books. There's writing for screenplays. It's a whole catalog or genre in and of itself. And to join me is another author, my good friend Stefen Welch. Stefen, welcome to the show.
Oh, a pleasure to be here, Al. Thank you for having me.
So you yourself have recently written, or I guess one might say, after you told me it was 3 years of hard work and labor, completed your comic book. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Certainly. So, like you're saying, it took me 3 years. Made this comic book. It's called Mimi. It started off as a short story I wanted to write. I was writing a lot of short stories and some poetry and making like anthology books. And then, I thought I would really like to try and write a comic book. And, what would I want to see? And Mimi is kind of a combination of like Stranger Things, John Carpenter's The Thing, and Alien. Focuses on like the U.S. space station, gets an alien sample. They, of course, going to do experiments on it. Turns out it's a hostile thing, takes over somebody's body, and then from there, it catapults itself down to Earth, where it harbors itself within a dog to get it around because sunlight will burn it. And it's how its first interaction with like humanity, and it ends on a cliff note, right? So there is a part 2 and a part 3 that have been written, but that's a little bit down the pipeline in terms of when the artist I've been working with is going to be able to get around to start that.
So, do you think like it's soon going to be like that big, bold next major trio that everybody is going to be like itching to get at Barnes & Noble or something like that?
I would love for it to be in Barnes & Noble. I mean, I'd be happy if it was at Walmart, so is that down the road? I hope so. I've been emailing Barnes & Nobles back home, like in Western Mass, about doing some sort of author event, where I could read Mimi or pages of Mimi, sign stuff, or if people wanted to buy it, that'd be cool. I haven't had any luck yet, but I'm hopeful. I hope one day, like realistically, my kids will be like, "This is that weird thing Dad did." That's kind of the overall goal.
Well, maybe they won't consider it weird if maybe someday like you're some big name author, in the same league as Stephen King, except less traumatizing.
No, one would hope. So hopefully good things are coming with that. It's for me, it's nice to see like this is something I thought in my head, and now it's like a physical thing that like people could pick up and buy or look at. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. And you mentioned like, yeah, writing takes a lot of time. And as someone who's a screenwriter and has a background in film, I'm sure you can relate to this, right? Like before you even start, it's just about finding an idea of something you yourself would want to see, or something that, this would be my spin on this. Like, they've done a lot of action movies, but have they done an Al Tessier action movie, right?
No, I don't think they have. And one thing, like, so you said that this started as a culmination of short stories you had written a little while back. What made you realize that it was fit for a comic book? Because one thing that I've realized in my time as a writer is that sometimes you think it'll do great as one element of writing, whether that be a script or that be a book or a comic book, and then you realize, you know what, there's too much packed in here that it doesn't fit the groove of just that. What made you realize that it was meant for a comic book and not like a regular kid's book?
That's an excellent question. Well, one, there's too much swearing for it to be a kid's. Not that kids don't swear, but I might get some looks from moms if they're like, "Oh, you're the reason my son or daughter knows that word."
They're already using vile language in front of their children on a regular basis, so what's it really matter?
I guess that's true. It might just speed up the process.
Sure.
So in terms of this, I really wanted it to be something you could see, and I'm not saying you can't visualize things when you're reading like a traditional book, but I feel like some of the words, the wording, and the description might have been a little bit complicated. And then I thought, like, oh well, if this was a movie, they storyboard things, and that's a kind of a way to kind of get through details. Like they're going to be running, right? Like instead of talking about how they're running or how their breathing was when they're running, you can just show, like, hey, they're running, and it looks like it's hard. Add description words. And I was like, I'd like to challenge myself and try a comic book because I've never done that, and I thought that it might be a fun way of doing it because I'm sure other people can relate, but sometimes writing like narratively or like like scripts or even stories, you get stuck a lot. And you're like, I got to type this, where that can be a little frustrating. Not that it isn't frustrating, in this medium, but it's a lot cooler, I think, when you kind of see it in your head and then you can talk to an artist and kind of have that collaborative spirit where sometimes just writing a story or a script can feel kind of isolating if you don't have like a writing room or someone you're writing it with. With comics, it's kind of, at least in my very minimal experience, it seems like it's a joint effort.
I can definitely understand. What was it? There was a story I was trying to write for a script a couple of years back, and I kind of hit a nail. I just got stuck with it, and I was writing as a script, but there was so much detail and so many elements behind what was going on in those moments that I came to realize I don't think I can write this as a script. And I recently kind of went back to the drawing board square A with it, and I've started writing it as more as a dystopian novel.
That's awesome.
And I feel that it's working better that way because, I mean, we've seen plenty of dystopian stories projected on the big screen and stuff like that, but some of the ones that people know so well, such as the Hunger Games, it all started out as a book. Because I think also the writer comes to realize that you need to kind of let every element of it flow out. And that gives people the ability to take their own interpretation of it and soak it all in and really visualize it. That's one thing that I've come to know, is that sometimes more detail isn't always, regardless of how brilliant it isn't meant for the silver screen. Or if it is, maybe you're not the one who's meant to put it there first.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think what's important in your story is you didn't give up on the idea just because like you hit the nail. You just found like, okay, well, how am I going to use this nail, to make this be something like similar but also different, and I think that's important when writing. Like if you have a good idea, and you come to a crossroads, you can zig and zag. You don't have to just go straight. There's other ways of getting it out there. And I think you captured that, really nicely in your head. If I may, why do you think sometimes people might say, oh, I have this really good idea, but I'm not sure how to do it? Why do you think they like give up or like never touch it again?
Ooh, that's a good idea. I think some of them, they either lose the drive,
Mhm.
maybe not have enough confidence in their abilities, or like, you know what, I don't even know how this world of publishing works under any circumstances. How am I supposed to get it to the man and stuff? So maybe that might be one of the reasons why they hit a roadblock. Or I don't know, over time, some of the premises, the loopholes get lost and confused because we both know that it takes more than just 1 year sometimes to make a good story come to life. I mean, what is it? The script that I'm really currently trying to like make into a movie, The Demon in the Woods. It only took me like, I think, 2 days to write the entire script, but it took me 5 years of reviews and changes and editing in order to get the final product.
Well, that's very impressive. Like that you just like getting that idea out. That's a huge win. But like you said, right? It's like anything, right? It's kind of like a baby. You're nurturing it. You're watching it grow until it's ready to like ride its bike without you pushing it or
Yes,
being right there.
yes, very much
Um,
so.
so I think a lot of that comes to like, are you willing to go the distance for your idea, right? For your creativity.
Yeah, and that's a thing that I think a lot of people like. The mistake they make is they hit that point of like, you know what, I don't even think I can keep going forward because maybe they've dealt with so much rejection. And guys, here's the fact: Stephen King got rejected. I think it was like 50 times from various publishers when he was trying to sell Carrie. Now look at the guy. I'm sure that every single publisher who rejected him all those years back has severe regrets as to what they did.
Yeah. Well, like even King Kong, the 1970s King Kong with Jeff Bridges.
Mhm.
Meryl Streep auditioned for the part that Jessica Lange went for, and the producers told her she was too ugly for it. And like Meryl Streep's the most decorated, I think, actress of our time.
Quite
With
possibly. I can't even imagine. I know she's been nominated for an Academy Award, I think like 7 times.
yeah, and
But
she's won at least two.
yes, yeah. So I really do kind of hit that question mark of, okay, now they regret it. And you'll hear countless stories about actors regretting a role they turned down, and they're like, oh my God, my career would have turned out so much better. Like, what is it? Like, David Schwimmer was originally supposed to take like Will Smith's role in Men in Black. Didn't take it. Now, well, I mean, Will Smith has definitely made a slapping statement for himself. Pardon my dark humor. But I'm sure David Schwimmer like really has deep regrets because his career would have gone in a totally different direction. Today we will only remember him as Ross from Friends.
Yeah, yeah. And he's still making buttloads of money, even if he is only Ross. Like the residuals for that are crazy. So, all it takes is one thing to stick.
Yes.
So if you got like a Swiss Army knife of ideas, one of them's gonna land.
Yeah, well, I'm currently working on 2 scripts and 1 novel, which is a lot to really admit to. And people are probably thinking, like, take it one step at a time, man. Like, don't, like, do it all in one sitting. Well, I'm trying to, like, so I have found people who are interested in the next script. So I'm trying to, like, maybe hit the gas a little bit and focus more on that while juggling the novel at the same time. And I was really thinking and doing some like note taking. I have a weird feeling that this novel, it's called Circa, could transition into maybe like a series of at least 3 books.
Like you're saying, James Cameron used to have 3 desks in his house. One where he was writing like Terminator 2, one where he was writing Aliens, and then like one where he was writing Rambo. So like you kind of got your own situation like that, and I think that's good though because I was watching YouTube and there's this guy on there. His name is Dallas, but he's called Tendo. He has his channel is called Duck Duck Blue. It's fantastic. And he said, when he was writing, he always used to like to leave something for him to jump off, like a jump off point for the next day. So it
Mm.
sounds like you're kind of leaving yourself jump off points. Like, okay, I jumped off here today on this, and then this is the place I'm jumping off when I come back to it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's good because you got it down on paper. Like while you're talking about, you got those things. In a lot of ways, I've kind of switched gears. I know you and I worked on some films a couple of years back, and the pandemic kind of messed up a lot of things. So comic books have kind of become the outlet I'm in. So I'm working on this like medieval samurai story, and I'm also working on a horror anthology called 1980 something, and like it's
Don't
hard.
say 1984. We already read that in high school, and I actually cheated. My apologies to whoever my teacher was at that time. I cheated in order to pass that class. I'm sorry. I read 40 pages in. I couldn't understand the book. Now I regret it because I actually do understand the book.
That's okay. They'll forgive you. You've gotten someplace really good, and that's what matters. Your English teachers would be proud.
Oh, yeah.
But like you're talking about, right? Jump off points are important, and I think if you have a lot of ideas, it's good to start each of them and then slowly jump your way through each page or chapter or whatever you're doing.
One thing that I'll do sometimes, and I'm probably not the only author who has like their own methodologies, is sometimes I'll be at work and I have like this little journal thing on my phone. And what I'll do is I will actually, a good idea will come to mind, and I'll pull out the journal and start writing it just then and there while it's still fresh in my mind, so that it saves and I can just come back to it at another time, or when I'm back in front of the computer, I can sit down and like, ooh, I've already got it saved. So that's something that I think is not a bad idea for some people, even though it sounds a little ridiculous, is just right in the moment. When you have it, like, let it all out, because if you don't, you're going to lose that perfect train of thought for something that could be brilliant.
Well, let me ask you, this is a two-part question. So first thing is, like, when you have an idea, right, say you write it down in your journal, how do you decide, like, yeah, I want to run with this? And then if you do decide to run with it, how long do you give yourself like, okay, I'm going to try and write for like 20 minutes, or I'm going to try and write 3 pages, no matter how long that is? Like, what's your cutoff point?
My cutoff point is, oh God, kind of, I think, has to do more with the consistency. Okay. It has to do with, okay, I've got this moment, like, okay, like the book I'm writing, it's called Circa. One thing that kind of originally, like I said, it was originally a script called 2050, which was basically about a dystopian United States after a massive, brutal, modern age civil war. And I tried like writing it as a script and hit a roadblock and figured that maybe this would do better as a novel. And I called it Circa. Same kind of idea, like modern day, like civil war. You see the aftermath, what America has become, ravaged by this great divide. And I really try to pace it and focus, okay, you got to start at square A. But if there are ideas in the middle, what I'll do is I'll be like, you know what, let's just focus on that one idea for now. Like this one group of characters, or what could be this one chapter in the book. And that's where I'll just like spill it all out. And then like, okay, I don't think I can do more with this chapter. Enough for today.
So you'll just keep going until you like the wells run dry for now.
Basically, yeah. Okay. The wells have to run dry before I like
you hit the pause button.
Exactly, yeah.
And then how about when you have an idea, right? Like Circa. When did you decide like this is it? Like I'm gonna run with this one. Like how did you decide you're gonna run with that idea?
So I was having some sort of thought bubble moment a little while ago, a couple weeks ago, and I had thought about the script 2050, and I was like, can I still make this into something? And I kind of just took time to really think, and I'm like, reminded myself there's just so much detail fabricated into this one story. I know it needs to really all come out. Every element, every character's action, move, their personality needs to be detailed. And that's why I was like, you know what? Trash the script, take all the ideas, start from square A as a book. And I just sat down and kind of like spilled out the various characters and their personality traits, what they do, and really, I think, made a few changes in the works. It's about dystopian America that's been ravaged after a terrible, brutal civil war, and it focuses mainly on these two brothers. Who one of them is a leading political figure, the other is just an average Joe contributing and trying to survive in this new society we have to live in. And the younger brother, his son goes missing, and even though he has a very rough relationship with his older brother, the politician, he has to set aside a lot of those frustrations and approach him for some really serious help in finding their son, who has gone missing into the other half of America that is divided by a wall. Yes, they eventually built the wall. Except here's the catch. It's us who built it.
Okay, that makes sense.
To separate us from the totalitarian regime on the other side.
Wow.
That's what I did. I made America, half of it is a democratic nation, the other half got what they wanted, which is a more authoritarian regime that is very much sunk south. I tried to imagine if like a part of America was North Korea. What might it look
solid.
like? Yes. I made it. I didn't. Another thing about sometimes in this writing is it's great to really exercise your brain and your imagination with dystopian work. But I think what I thought is like, if you're going to make this as disturbing, as dark as possible, you have to make it seem as real as possible. So I didn't like maybe go to the really creative extent that you would see in like the Hunger Games for a dystopian nation, and I tried to figure on making it as real as possible, like the real names of cities and how we live our lives and operate, and try and like visualize that idea. How does one come back to normal after such a cataclysmic event that's shook the world?
So you're adding a lot of like heart to it. You know, like a lot of like, yeah, this is just your day to day, and then this is the one thing that's slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pretty big, huge, slightly different thing.
Yes.
Now, were there ideas that you thought about putting in there, and then you were like, oh, I need to tame this down a little bit?
God, that's... I think one thing that I wanted to do was make it... Originally, the first idea was a little too Hunger Games-ish, and I think I wanted to cut down on the bloodiness, the bloody gore of like youth kind of killing one another. I mean, death does play a part in this story, but I think I needed to tame it down and focus it also because I think this is something that's more meant for like a more of an adult audience than it might be just like teenagers and stuff. This is more like young adult kind of 20s, maybe 30s hitting the zone. Because when I write, I also like to be a little raunchy and use some sour language in there from time to time, or maybe detail like stuff that we do when people aren't around.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I think those things are also important colors to paint with, though, right? Because it's the human experience is far from perfect. You know, as my friend and then my therapist told me, you know, this is our first time being alive. You know, everyone's still figuring out, so it's going to get messy. And I think putting that on pages is important. Do you remember Alberto from high school?
Yes, okay. I do. I actually had the chance to see him at the high school reunion.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's definitely got a lot more hair on his face than the last time I'd seen him.
He's rocking a cool beard.
Yeah, we all are.
Yes, that's another thing. Like, it seems like once you're 28, 29, 30, you just have a beard now.
Oh, yeah.
It's
the new norm.
It's the new norm. It's a requirement.
Yes.
But anyway, Alberto was telling me that you can find almost any answer in a book. Someone's always written a book about something that connects to you. So,
Mm.
like, whatever things you're thinking and feeling about, someone else is trying to come to that realization. Whether you and me and whoever else is writing knows it or not, someone's searching for that kind of a thing.
Mhm.
So I think it's good. The colors you're painting with, that's fun.
Yes, yeah, I definitely agree. Just about anything can be written down into a book, even the most mundane stuff imaginable. Like sometimes I'll go into bookstores, like typically, unfortunately, there's no longer a Barnes and Noble around where we live here in Boston. So I actually have to go to Harvard Square. They have a very nice bookstore there. Well, multiple bookstores because it's Harvard. So that's where all the brainiacs hang out. And I'll see stuff that I just like am amazed. Like I'm like, is this really a book? Is this really a book? And I'm like, hey, if it can be written, if there's a thought there, an idea, yeah, of course you can turn it into a book.
Yeah.
I haven't had the chance to go because there's definitely some stuff I need to check out. But you plan on making Mimi into more. Give us some details. Where are you at right now with like Mimi Part 2 or Mimi Part 3?
So in terms of Mimi Part 2 and 3 are both written and done. I wrote them back to back last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I've gone through and I've edited them, like you were talking about revisions, going over, does this make sense? Should I add something? Should I not add something? So presently, they're both in their final draft era. If as we, to throw some Taylor Swift love in there, they're in their final draft era. The artist I'm working with goes by Azure Sphinx. You can look them up on Instagram if you or your listeners are interested. Very talented artist. They're presently working on a comic book called Lavecchio, which is based on a film that I made in high school where my grandma fought a street gang. So that's the next project, comic book wise, that's coming out. And then, like I said, I'm working on a Japanese. I was going to say film. It'd be cool if it was a film, but it's like a graphic novel. It's going to be a one and done storyline. 70 pages deep into it.
Oh wow!
It's called Okami Ken, which means wolf fist. And then I'm working on a horror anthology called 1980 something, which is like the werewolf is the principal. There's a lake monster at the camp. People are robbing a morgue and they fight zombies. The indigenous tribes are fighting vampires coming over to settle the new land. Bigfoot's getting hunted by aliens, right? Those are like some of the ideas for that specific project. But as far as Mimi goes, part 2 is about Mimi being hunted by the government and how that goes. And then part 3 is about the final showdown between Mimi and the secret government agency that wants to hide aliens from the world.
Well, we already know that the government is already hiding like aliens and secret stuff from us. I mean, for cripe's sake, I worked with the DoD for 3 years. Like, it's all there, black and white. They are hiding it from you guys. They just don't want to disclose it because then that's going to apparently ruin their reputation, which they've already done very well. Like, that's the problem with the intelligence department. They've already made a very bad name for themselves after like so many years of fuck ups and mistakes. So what's the use hiding from it? If there's aliens, hey, Americans want to know.
It's true. And like it's interesting you mentioned this, right? There's there's already been so many mess ups, there's so many documented instances of people like seeing this or run-ins with the government about this stuff. Do you remember God, it was a couple years ago, Al, when people were going to storm Area 51.
I may have heard about that.
Okay.
I know that is the hub, that's the place that everybody needs to go if they truly have a taste for alien life forms.
Yes. So that event happened. I think there's some footage of it on YouTube where basically some dude in a college dorm was like, "Let's storm Area 51," and then it got traction. A lot of people showed up in Nevada, and it was like, "Storm Area 51. They can't catch all of us." So like Mimi Part 3 opens with people like about to storm Area 51 from like this event. So there's like some real world connection in there, and then there's also a lot of like, made up fictitious stuff that I would want to see in a movie. Is what I tried to put down on paper.
Yeah, I think that's always great when writers take something that's very much real world or inspired by something they went through and fabricated it into the story. It's like it's like adding part of your personality to the script, or adding a part of your personality to the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think both with movies, when you can cast people as like, I want this person to look like my brother or my grandma or my dad, and then like if you can do that, that's cool. And then what I've liked about with comics is if like I want them to look like someone, I can just have them like, oh, here's a picture of what this person looks like, make them look like this. So that's been kind of fun.
Why didn't you consider selling it to Marvel or DC?
So Image Comics, among other comics, right? Like I'm sure Marvel and DC have submissions, right, where they'll maybe look at stuff. But Image Comics, doing some research about that, like they're kind of creator based and owned. So like if you come up with an idea and they pick it up, like I think they'll take maybe a percentage. I don't remember all the logistics, but the control of the comic is to you, right? Because it's creator based. Oh, yeah. So it would be you and the team who came up with it would be who would write on it and go from there. So I submitted to Image Comics, and they didn't go for it this time, and that's cool. It was fun just to be like, yeah, man, like I'm gonna throw it out there and see what they say, and then they didn't pick it up, or who knows if they got around to looking at it, but. Then I was like, okay, I still want this to happen. So how am I just going to put it out there? And luckily, I got I got a good artist, and then I have another good compadre named Dan, who's really, really smart and very creative, and he helped me organize it and put it together. So big shout outs to Dan and to Azure Sphinx for, their work on this project.
Yeah. Plus, I think like DC and Marvel, they've already gotten enough hype. They don't need any new ideas that they can just warp and turn into movies that are either going to do well or do terribly. Stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, selfishly, like, obviously I'd love that just because it'd be like, this isn't the house that Batman built, but like, well, you never know. You never know.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, I'm excited about Mimi Part 2 and Part 3. Both of those are pretty long. I would say they're the longest things I had written up till now in terms of this. Like sometimes you can feel like it's going on, and you're like, okay, I got to find a solid endpoint.
Yes, yes, that's the thing.
What are your thoughts on endings? Do you find them hard?
Endings can be challenging, just like beginnings can be challenging. Like when I first started writing Circa, I didn't exactly know from an angle of a novel how to perfectly lead people into the introduction of just even one character. So I kind of had to think back about how other books I've read how they open it, and not really duplicate what they've done, but maybe feed off of that. Use it as inspiration. Okay, this is how I introduce it. That's what's going to appeal to people. Where do I leave off with that character for now? Because the thing about endings is that the ending is like the real mic drop for any book, any film whatsoever, because it really kind of gets the reader, gets the audience to, I don't want to like maybe think a little much and trigger that emotion like, oh my god, it's a cliffhanger ending. What's next? What's next? That really gives them a thirst. That really feeds their appetite. Like they want more and more and more. or if they maybe have put the pieces of the puzzle together as the story has progressed, they're realizing, yeah, we already know how this is going to end. Of course, then it's not a bad idea when you really have fed into their thoughts and desires that they think it's going to end, that you send that 360 like cliffhanger spin where it's the exact opposite. That's actually something that sometimes I love but hate at the same time, especially when the ending is they surprisingly like kill off a character that you loved so dearly.
Like Game of Thrones with Ned Stark just suddenly gets beheaded. Like, no.
Yeah, or what is it like when I was watching you and you find that Delilah had her throat cut, and I'm like, what? She was perfect for him, and now she's gone. Yes.
You know, yeah, I think you keeping, like, it sounds just like kind of keeping the audience engaged and satisfied with the ending and up to it. Like, that's hard, right? Even if the character is bad or malicious or evil and you want them to go, it's like, okay, how do I give them the send off they deserve?
Yes,
as well
yeah.
as give the audience the ending they deserve and give me the ending I deserve with this. Because
Yes.
like you had said in the very beginning, right? Like it's taken, well, we were talking, you know, on one project, it's been like 10 years of work into developing something. So that's a long time to like have ideas, have notes, have like, you know, structure of like, oh, this could happen here, this could happen there. And then so like, how do you feel once you complete something that's taken you so long to do, you know?
You definitely feel a great deal of satisfaction and pride. It's kind of like winning gold at the Olympics. You're like, I did it! Finally, all that hard work and labor paid off. So even though like it might not be like there just yet, or you haven't won, you still feel like you've won because writing it was actually the hard part. Like getting it sold is actually probably going to be a lot easier than people think. I think people who don't understand writing all that well would come to find that very shortly. Like if I were just to tell all my listeners right now, hey, now what I want you to do is I want you to go out and write me a short story that's 5 pages long. It can be about any subject matter whatsoever. And they'll be like, oh, that's easy. And then they find themselves 3 hours later being like, this is harder than I thought it would be.
No, you're right. You're right. You know, it's a medium that certainly there's a lot of love and there's a lot of pain and there's a little bit of everything in between.
Oh, definitely.
I guess the thing from that talking about endings, right? And obviously you got a couple different projects going on all at once. Is do you ever think when you do complete something, you might want like a break or some rest time, or are you thinking finishing this project's giving me momentum to do the next one, or do you feel like no, I need to pause and really think about what I want to do next?
I think for me, it's you need to pause and think about what to do next. Because also, I'm the kind of guy, I don't like to do the same thing twice. I really don't. I feel that is kind of somewhat boring, to be honest. I mean, we do look at a lot of authors and filmmakers who have their own kind of genre in and of themselves. Like, I like to say when I'm at like a bookstore, like Stephen King should just have an aisle dedicated only to himself because he's Stephen King. Or you look at, like you had mentioned, James Cameron. The thing is, James Cameron's a variety-driven filmmaker. Like, he is always doing something different. He never really duplicates what he did before. That's kind of me. I don't like to do the same thing twice. Not that it's not a bad idea, but you kind of are only going to be remembered for that theme and that theme alone.
Yeah, and I'm sure it presents a certain challenge as well. You know, if you're kind of stepping out of your comfort zone. I know in writing like Mimi 1, 2, and 3, I felt very comfortable in that world because it's like, oh, okay, I got the hook of this, you know. And then when you shift into a different thing, like I've never really written horror per se. I've written like one kind of short monster story called Sweet Dreams, and I wrote a story about like hippos attacking people called Kiboko. But like I've never done horror.
Mm.
So I find that to be very cool, but I also find it challenging. So I guess like when you're doing this, Al,
Mhm.
how do you decide which thing you want to step into? Right? So like Circa is kind of this very large political drama action dystopian like beauty and Marvel wrapped in one thing, right? So you
Mhm.
got that on one idea. Then say you step out and you're like, oh, I want to try this next. Do you still think the skills you use to do Circa would apply to this, or do you kind of got to look at it like a different way? Like, do you watch rom coms when you're going to write a rom com? Do you watch monster movies if you're going to write a monster movie? Like, what do you
Oh
do when you
yes,
switch?
that is part of my like my study session is if I'm writing something romantic, I will definitely watch a couple of rom-coms or even something that's very serious and romantic in order to find the right vibe.
Hmm.
The first script I ever wrote, The Demon in the Woods, is actually a dark comedy. And originally it was just written just to be like horror. Because how it works with The Demon in the Woods, and this is the one that I'm currently trying to sell, or at least find somebody to partner with to make it a reality, is it had been written in just one chunk by an old classmate of mine, and I read it and I read through it and I'm like, wow, this is shit. So I was like, I know I can do better, and the rest of it was all me. I didn't even really need to like watch any horror per se. I was already able to pick up like some of the bits and pieces in the vibe based on what he had given me and just tailored it to my own liking. And as I continued doing it, certain like new elements came into play that I was like, I think this fits well. Or in other instances, I hit that point where I'm like, you know what, this needs a good laugh. And it originally was just meant to be just straight up horror. But I quickly realized, no, I can do this as like that perfect bullseye of comedy and horror packed into one. Because everybody loves some comedic relief along the way, especially when
Absolutely.
it comes to very dark content.
It helps, I think, let people feel like, oh, okay, I can dip my toe in this, and then you get them.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, very much so, yes. And this is like The Demon in the Woods is filled with like swearing and also a little bit of like dirtiness, adult dirtiness, but not like pushing the envelope to the extreme.
Right.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like sometimes you do have to soak in like who your audience is going to be, and you need to know when to put the guardrails up.
Yeah. Or at least like the railing. Here, hold on to this if you're getting a
Mm-hmm.
little antsy about it.
Especially now in today's day and age with a lot of the content they've put out for films, you have to be, as people are saying, you have to be soft. But I think also, in my opinion, you just have to know when too much is too much, because we have an entire generation that's like, so their whole life is media, their whole life is technology and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, it's different from the world we were born into. For them, all they're watching on a daily basis is YouTube, YouTube, YouTube. You know what? Let's take a break from YouTube. Let's tailor to like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, etc. And streaming services keep throwing out all this new content, all these new series. And because, like, whether they believe it or not, the new audience is this young generation, you have to know that they might be, and also they're sensitive to a lot of stuff that you and I might find hysterical. Like, it's the holiday season, so what's the first thing we think about the holiday season? Home Alone.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that epic scene. Wonderful scene. I'm gonna give you till the count of 10 to get you ugly, yellow, no good keister off my property before I pump your guts full of lead. 1, 2, 10. I'm sure like an average 8-year-old who's watching that now might be like, oh my god, mommy, daddy, that's too much. I'm like, this is hysterical. How is that too much?
In comparative to what like people are watching today. Yeah, I see
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
It also seems like people's attention spans are like because everything is so quick cut. It's just
Mm. Yes,
So like
yes, very much
the
so.
slow burn isn't really for people always these days. Um, but like in like with the projects you're doing,
Mhm.
do you write them because you see something that's similar doing well and you're like, oh, I could do that? Or when you have an idea, you're like, yeah, I'm writing this and because I want to write it and I think it'd look cool or be dope or I'd want to pick this up if I saw it in the store, and I feel like those two can go hand in hand, you know. But like, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing is, one of the stories that's on my list that I've been writing, it's a script. It's called My Cousin Juan. That's actually based on a lie I told to people, and I really got in deep with it with them. I just went on and on and on. They're like, wait, that was a lie? I'm like, yeah, I was bullshitting you guys. And they're like, that's so detailed. This would do great as a movie, as a story. And that's when it clicked. I'm like, if they're so enamored or appealing to this lie, then you know what? Let me make the lie into truth.
Hmm.
So I already got like the audience's opinion just from telling a really ridiculous lie. And the lie was that I had a cousin who was a member of the Mexican cartel.
My cousin Juan.
My
That's
cousin Juan.
fantastic.
Yes, yeah. It's yeah. The story itself, I do try to focus very deeply on the drug wars and stuff like that, but also the main aim of My Cousin Juan is for people to understand that in this world, once you're in, there is no easy way out, or there isn't a way out. You have two options for getting your way out: you die, or you have to vanish for forever.
Yeah, that seems about right for that world.
Yes, yeah.
For most criminal enterprises. But I like the fact that like you're maybe not thinking, let me just test the story out and see if people are interested and want to know more. And then they were, and then you're like, huh, I lied to you. This is not true, but you just proved that this would be cool, so I'm going to write more. Like that's a fun way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah.
I think, what is it? I had a writing class in college, and like I had mentioned, the story about hippos. And I
Mm-hmm.
had this one person, like how the guy did the class was when it was your time to share, you, the author of the story,
Yeah.
couldn't talk. You just had to listen to people's critiques and what they
Yeah.
said. Now, some was positive, some was middle of the road, and some was like just they didn't like it. And this one individual did not like it at all and was very vocal about it. And in my head, I'm thinking, like, sure, this is for a grade, but like, I didn't write this story for you. Like, I
Mm.
wrote this story for me. And if you like it, that's awesome. And then I guess if you don't like it, that's also pretty cool. But like at the end of the day, this was written for me. I didn't write it for you.
Yeah.
So
I had, what is it, when I took a playwriting class in college, I had that experience. One that it was probably the one that got the most controversy. Like, I kind of got spit on for the story, yeah, because people didn't really like my take on it. I'm like, well, your experiences are a hell of a lot different than mine, so you shouldn't be judging.
yeah,
Like, take a walk in my shoes. Maybe then you'll understand, because it was actually the story was called Girls, Guys, and Guinness, and it was about, like, kind of, I guess one might say, something similar to my experience of being rejected on so many occasions and what it feels like from an angle. And this chick in my class who was an actress, but actually did not have much talent, in my opinion. Far too overdramatic of a woman. She just was kind of chastising me and spitting on me, and I'm thinking to myself, sweetheart, I don't give a fuck what you think. If you've had my dating experience and how much of a failure I've been, then you'll understand.
well, let's just say you're not a failure. It's just they're not the right people. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, definitely.
You
And
know,
that's another thing about writing is criticism. We have to learn to deal with the critique and the opinions, regardless of how harsh it may be or how soft it may be. Because I guess one might say criticism is key. I find that criticism is key because criticism helps pave the road as to where do you go next? Where do you go from here? Do I stick with what I have, or do I shift gears a little bit and spin to a different direction?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very solid point. I think you should surround yourself with people whose opinion you really trust, and kind
Yeah.
of go, take that into account, and then other people who, because everyone has opinions.
Mm,
So the people who aren't in that circle, it's like, yeah, they're entitled to that thought. That doesn't
mm,
mean they're right. Doesn't mean they're wrong either.
true.
But it has to be like where you're okay with hearing perhaps hard stuff from people whose opinions like you hold dear.
Hmm.
And finding those people can be kind of hard.
Yeah, that's very, very true. That's why I start with sharing some of my material with friends before I try to put it out there, because I need, I guess one might say, a little bit of positive but also mixed opinions at the same time, rather than just get the harshness and the ridicule and judgment.
Yeah,
You need to soften yourself up before you take those big blows.
that's a good way. Take small steps with it. Yeah, that's perfectly
Yeah.
said, Al. Perfectly said.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, but some of the stuff I've come up with, truth be told, people have told me that this was a good idea. I was thinking very much about my own experience, battling immigration, USCIS, and how other people have to handle this. And I was telling this guy I stumbled paths with about how it works, getting because one thing that is huge on the news these days is the border crisis and all these people who are fleeing Venezuela to come to the United States and seek out a better life. And I was explaining to this guy how it works. And I was like, there are only three ways to get here. It's one, you can, if you're lucky enough, marry an American and you've kind of got a bit of a golden ticket to come here. Two is maybe you escape from Venezuela to another part of Latin America, work hard there for a couple of years, maybe make a connection in the United States, and then you wait for the visa lottery to get a work visa. Or last but not least, you take the road that most people are taking, which is you cross the Darien Gap through the jungles of Colombia into Panama, and from there you keep moving forward through the remainder of Latin America, cross the Devil's Highway to Mexico into Southern California or something like that. And he was like, that sounds like an interesting idea. That might be an interesting story. And I've thought about maybe writing that later down the line. I call it Three Roads to Florida.
That's an awesome title. 3 Roads
Yes.
to Florida.
Well, the idea behind it, I've been thinking about this story, and for me, it's I need to sit down. I need to really do a bit more in depth. I mean, I already know a lot about USCIS immigration and people from Venezuela coming to the United States. I wanted to really, if I want to write this, I want to write it in a way where it's told to make people open their eyes and think of it differently. Because I actually hate how people will scrutinize and spit upon the people who are at the border coming to seek a new life and stuff like that. They look at it from with too much Western eyes. They don't really look at it from the angle of, okay, have you lived what they've been through? Maybe if you lived what they've been through, then you will understand.
Yeah. And the other thing is everyone here who's not indigenous is an immigrant who came here looking for the same thing.
And that's something that a lot of people in this country overlook. They don't ever take that into consideration.
Yeah.
I watched this documentary on YouTube, and they interviewed a guy, and he said that he'd crossed the Darien twice in his life. That says something. If somebody can openly admit they've crossed the Darien Gap twice in their life in attempts to flee Venezuela and make it to the United States, that says a lot and will make you understand even more how bad it is and how desperate they are to seek a better life.
And then it's important that type of stuff gets out there, be it through your writing, like 3 Roads to Florida, the news, other forms of media, things of that nature. Those are stories that need to be told.
Very much so, yeah. And this is coming from a guy, I don't even watch the news anymore. I just can't.
Yeah.
And the news I do watch, I watch like these deep dive journalists who have like YouTube channels and stuff like that, like Vox and stuff, where they try to be as unbiased as possible, and they just use like articles, interviews, and stuff that's been written about certain political figures or certain global occurrences to just let the truth come out, because I feel that's more important. Because if you just look at news in today's day and age, it's very much like there's no real middle ground. It's either left or right.
Yeah, there's no gray zone.
No. So I try to find like gray zone news.
Now, in terms of writing, buddy, like bringing that into this, do you feel like because some people write either films, comics, books, what have you, can end up being like more right or left leaning, right? They include some sort of political overtone where it's like, which is a great movie, but for instance, American Sniper, very much like pro, guns, pro military, not suggesting that that's wrong, because it's not, like veterans are heroes.
Yes.
But things of that nature certainly can also be used in propaganda-esque stuff. So in your writing, do you try to leave politics out of it? I mean, I know some of the stuff you're writing involves that, right? But when in other projects, do you kind of like, you know what, there's enough divisiveness in the world. Let's just try and tell a story.
Yeah, well, with The Demon in the Woods, I really did try to put like politics flush down the toilet and just focus on that idea of like dark humor, dark comedy, and kind of a way to make people jump and laugh at the same time. With My Cousin Juan, my only goal is really to just show people like this is what happens in that world. I don't want to really get too political with it, but just focus on the truth is the truth. And get people to look at it from a different angle and maybe think at it with different eyes, especially people who don't understand that world under any circumstances.
So it's kind of more like, let me show you something, that might spark your interest to look into it on your own.
Yes,
but you're not trying to like ham fist it like you're going to eat this fist. It's like, here's a tablespoon of something. If you like that, maybe go and look into some other things.
Yeah, because like you said with American Sniper and stuff like that, like Chris Kyle, his story has gotten criticism on both sides of the equation. Some people have labeled him a hero, others have labeled him as a complete murderer. I mean, I get it. Like, the guy's got 160 kill counts via sniper alone. His total kill count, I think, was like over 200. Yeah. So that's why people have kind of not always like looked at the guy as being like an American hero, but more of like just a cold-blooded killer. And like, that's when I kind of nudge to people, how about you see interviews with people who really knew him?
Yeah.
That's one thing I like to do. Is like, I've seen interviews with his wife and family members and people who knew him to really like, you need to soak in the reality of who this person was as a human being. Kind of sometimes you gotta let the politics drop once in a while and just focus on the human element.
Now, I think that's a perfect way to ask this question, is like, when writing someone, if, a person, right? Now, obviously it's not the same as like making a real human, but when writing someone, creating someone just, solely up here, how do you do it? Like, what's your process for creating somebody?
Giving a person a personality and creating them is always tricky. Sometimes I might morph them after people I've met in my lifetime. In other instances, I try to give them various elements of somebody maybe similar to myself, or others who are the complete opposite of me as an individual and a human being. With 3 Roads to Florida, what I really wanted to focus on was the idea of somebody who has been raised in the United States and is so Americanized that they don't even really understand their own culture, the country they truly came from. They're so blindsided by American propaganda that when they finally end up in that situation where they're in Venezuela and they need to find a way to get back to the States, they're completely blind and they just have like a brain explosion. Like, so this is the real world. Yeah.
Although I like what you talked about with, like, you know, you try to base it maybe off of you or you at a particular point in life or other people. I know for myself, I base a lot of my characters off of my brother, or like, you know, the people who I thought were our heroes. Like, like we're gonna throw a little Batman, a little James Bond, a little Gandalf, you know, a little Taylor Swift in there, a little Carla Grimaldi in there. You know, like how can you know, that part's kind of fun to be a little bit like Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's definitely like, what is it? Like sometimes I even think about adding stuff I add into the equation is like really stupid occurrences that some friends of mine have been through, and I might use that as an element of humor to kind of build their personality. Kind of like that person who's been trying their whole life to get a date, and every time they try, it really backfires on them. Like that person who's gotten slapped in the face a few too many times, or gotten a no rejection from women, which has definitely killed their confidence, or put them in a position where they need to overexert their confidence.
I see what you're saying. And I think with doing that, right, like taking moments from people's lives or your own life, do you like alter it? So, or are you like, no, this is verbatim how it went?
I try to make it a bit neutral. I try to neutralize it and not, I try to use the story and the experience, but don't dive too deep into the details of it. Because I feel if you dive too deep into the details of it, especially if it was inspired by something somebody actually went through, it can hurt them. You know, it could hurt them or it could and burn them. And that's the last thing I want to do, is I want to like hurt somebody. Because I know I've fucked up a few too many times in my life, and I don't want to go back to that circumstances of fucking up and ruining things.
No, I think that's a good note for writers or just in general. When you are borrowing a piece of someone's life or a moment of their life, you know, it's not totally yours. So, you know, handle that respectfully as you can.
Yes,
when you're doing it. Or do you feel like you should have to ask permission?
I do feel that sometimes it is important to ask permission. When I was on Was I in a Cult? And I was also on another podcast. The episode isn't out yet. It's called Trust Me, where I detailed my story about being a member of what was basically turned out to be a theatrical cult. I did have to use examples of what some other people went through, and what I did was I tried to neutralize it as much as possible. I didn't use their name under any circumstances. I didn't go into like the deep details of what they experienced or kind of the repercussions. I just kind of told it very simply as it is, without like giving anything away, because my goal was this: tell the story, but don't have it ricochet and come back, because they've spent so many years trying to escape that level of trauma and psychological torment that they endured. You don't want it to kind of fall back into the equation. Just all those years of work to move forward will have been wasted.
Yeah, so I see what you like. Look, like I'm trying to make sure that like for Thanksgiving coming up, right? So this might be an awful analogy, but like you want all the hors d'oeuvres to complement the main course, right? Like I'm not trying to burn anything or make anybody feel like this is a gross taste. I don't want this, or I don't want to be here. Yeah, so doing the larger picture justice by adding your specific interpretation or point to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something, especially. And I think it's very important in writing. Like if you're writing, maybe say you're writing a memoir based on your own life experience, and you do have to call people out in it. Know when to stop calling them out, or how you are going to call them out. Because if you do it the wrong way, that can backfire. Like I'm sure a lot of you guys saw like Baby Reindeer on Netflix and stuff like that. The real life woman, oh my god, she's been going stir crazy. Like she even tried to sue Netflix. Yes, yeah. Yeah. Did you see Baby Reindeer?
I haven't. I've heard a lot of good things. I know they won like a bunch of, was it Emmys?
Yes, it won like I think like 6 Emmys. I recommend you watch it.
Okay.
It was very, very eye opening and interesting. I definitely liked it a lot.
All right, I'll make sure I put that in my queue.
Yes.
In terms of like being creative, Al, who would you say were some of the people who are like, you look up to and you're like, you know what? Yeah, I want to give it a whirl because of them. If you had a top 5, who would that be?
Number one, where I get most of my inspiration, Stanley Kubrick. I share the same birthday with the guy, and one thing I loved about him was that he never did the same thing twice. Steven Spielberg described him as being a chameleon.
Hmm.
God. He's always going to be number one on my list. Another guy who, in regards to storytelling, probably Tarantino.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that element, that auteur, like chapter-driven style of I don't know. There are so many like directors and filmmakers that I idolize and applaud over the years. I don't know how to call every single one of them out.
Hmm. No, that's a fair point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Stanley Kubrick's a solid choice just in general for him, just being a chameleon. And it
Yes.
sounds a lot of like what you're doing with your projects.
Mm-hmm. Very
No one
much so.
is the same.
No, I don't like, because I've also seen from what happens when you're that kind of, like, if you're that kind of actor who's always playing the same character, that sticks with you. That's all you find yourself doing. And when you do maybe get a taste for a new genre or a new film, it's very difficult for you to branch out and play that character, because everybody has known you for that one personality for, well, your whole career.
Yeah. No, you're right. Like Daniel Craig is James Bond. I think he's doing a good job breaking out of that with like Knives Out, and
Yes.
his upcoming film Queer looks very good.
Mm-hmm.
Or Harrison Ford being Han Solo and Indiana Jones. Like
Yes.
that's almost an impossible task to like be your own person when the world knows you as these two beloved heroes.
Oh yes, yeah.
Or like you said, like Stephen King is known for horror, and not that he does it exceptionally well, but he's written other things that are also really good. So it's just like, how do you keep evolving?
I know, yeah, that's the thing. Like the best example in regards to actors, Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Johnson always plays the lovable, charming, gotta smile kind of hero. You don't ever really see him being in that circumstances where he's the guy who maybe needs to get killed off or die.
Yeah, no, never. It's in his contract that he can't lose a fight.
Really?
Yeah.
Seriously, Dwayne, you gotta lose once in a while. I mean, or at least get some sort of spit in your face defeat by Vin Diesel.
Oh god. Vin Diesel also has in his contract that he can't lose a fight.
That's so, oh my god. If I was in their circumstances, I would actually want to lose a fight once in a while. I really, really would. I think that's why I love the scene from Expendables 2 when you see Jean-Claude Van Damme and Sylvester Stallone going at it together, because you don't even know who to root for. You know that it's like hands down either one of them could win.
And it's funny you mentioned the Expendables, because there's a scene where Stallone's getting his butt kicked, and someone's like, "What happened to you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm getting my ass kicked." And it's like, yeah, that's good. Like it shows like the hero can't just come in being a hero all the time and be like the man. Like you got to take some scratches and bruises and stuff. You got to be relatable.
Definitely. That's why I love that scene between the two of them so much. And I've like seen like how people, their thoughts and opinions. They said, if this was real life, JCVD would have won. Or others are like, no, that's impossible. I mean, do you know how hard that like Stallone can punch?
Mm.
So yeah.
No, those are good points, and all of that. I think, I guess the other thing is like, do you feel like you got writing right away or instantly, or do you think it takes time to when you feel like, yeah, I somewhat understand this, or I feel somewhat confident in what I can do?
It takes time. It definitely takes time. You need to spend a few years really, I don't want to say experimenting, but a few years really getting into your element and working at it in order to, I guess, get it right and hit the hammer to the nail. It's not something that you can just like jump into it and you're immediately going to write the next great American novel. It takes some studying, some evaluation, and just needing to absorb in order to like know that this is how it goes, or you're meant for this.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. But I'd like to circle to what we were saying originally. You just got to keep going, keep chasing the dream.
Yes,
and it'll all come together.
Yes. And for those of you who are listening who do want to come together, all you media junkies out there, if you want to promote and support this podcast, you can find me on Spotify or YouTube at Chatterbox. You can find me online at ATK Media -94 on Instagram. And don't forget to give me a shout out, DM me if you want to be a guest. Hey, we'll make it happen. And of course, like everybody says these days, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I want likes. I want people to like me.
Well, they'll be very smart if they do check you out, because you got a good program here, and can't thank you enough for having me on.
Yeah, and it was great having you on as a guest, man.
Thank you.
All right. So to all of you listeners out there, until next time, stay high on life.